Should I poke myself in the eye? Good evening. My name is Laura, and I am an alcoholic. And my home group is Fern Hill Friday night in Tacoma, 8 o'clock. So if you're ever in Tacoma, please come and visit us. It's my honor and my pleasure to introduce the speaker tonight because, see, I want to share her with you. She was my first sponsor. She's from Spokane. And I'm just going to ask you to help me give a warm woman-to-woman welcome to Gloria from Spokane.
Oh, my. Hi, my name's Gloria, and I'm an alcoholic. And it's good to be in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. First of all, what I would like to do is thank you all very much for making me feel very welcome here at this retreat. I haven't been to a retreat since I moved away, and that's been probably, 12 or 13 years. To get the preliminaries out of the way, I came to Alcoholics Anonymous when I was 36 years old in 1976. I had my 20th AA birthday April 2nd this year. And so, you're smart gals, so you figured out, I was 36 when I got here, and I've been sober 20 years. I have 5 children, 12 grandchildren, and I'm still married to my husband. Yeah. We had our 32nd anniversary in May. So I guess those are a few of the miracles. When Laura asked me, which was, oh heavens, it's been months. I said, next June, I said, good grief. I said, I live a day at a time, and I said, yeah, I'll do it, because I was brought up in Alcoholics Anonymous, never say no. And what I want to tell you is that June got here, and I left Spokane Thursday, and Thursday got here so quick that it just crept up on me. I was not ready. I came a day early, and I would like to say this not just for her, but I understand that there's some other young ladies here who graduated from college this week. And I would like to applaud them in the program. I'm going to just share with you a little bit of like what the book says, what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. Most of us know what it was like. I'm one of those alcoholics who was the helpless, hopeless variety. Started out as a party drinker. It made me fit in, all those things. I spent a lot of time walking around looking at the floor. When I was in high school, I would never look anybody square in the eyes. I always looked at the floor. If somebody said hello to me, I would say hello, but they didn't say hello very often because I was kind of unnoticeable. I just kind of fit in with the background. And I always had down deep inside of me that want to be like other folks, And I wasn't exactly sure what that was. I was kind of like, I was a turd floating around in this punch bowl with all these ice cubes, and I never was like the rest of the ice cubes, And I was sure that you guys all had a secret, like you walked around in new shoes and it didn't look like they hurt your feet, and mine always did. So I knew that you knew a secret to buying shoes that you weren't telling. That's kind of how I lived my life. You always knew something that I didn't know, you see. I left school when I was 16 years old. I ran away and got married the first time. And I've only been married twice. And I had my first baby when I was 17 years old. And I married a man who I loved very much. And out of about 8 years, we lived under the same roof about a year and a half. I don't know if anybody identifies with that. I had 3 children in that time, and I wanted children desperately. Because don't you know that children are supposed to love their moms? And I was so needy. I wanted love so much. Now, I was raised in a family of 4, and I was the oldest. And my mother was alcoholic. My dad was alcoholic. It's just rampant in my family, and it's like that in a lot of families. But I don't believe that's a prerequisite to make it to Alcoholics Anonymous, because I also know a lot of people in AA who did not come from alcoholic families, you see. So what did I do? I became, from a fun party drinker with the kids, I got married and I became an apricot brandy sipper. I could sip apricot brandy when my children napped, and it was okay, you see. Alcohol didn't become a real problem for me as I thought, okay. I had my first blackout when I was 19, and I did not think anything was real unusual. To be honest with you, I don't remember a lot of my drinking. I just don't. So I like getting sober. And I came to Alcoholics Anonymous by way of a hospital. And what happened was I had been treated for depression. I had a nervous breakdown when I was 12 years old. And I was treated for depression from that time on. And I was treated by a doctor who prescribed some medications for me. And I took these medications and I drank. And my world fell apart, you see. I found myself on April 2nd in the sand on the beach in Southern California. That's where I'm from. I had been on a 3-day bender. I had not been home, and I was doing the things that I said I would never do. Because, I've heard this before too. I was not going to be like my mother. I was not going to be like my grandmother. I went to see my grandmother before they had treatment centers and the strap-down marks on her arms, So anyway, to keep that part of it short, I came to on the beach with an empty bottle in the same clothes I'd been in for 3 days, and I didn't know where I was, and I didn't know how I got there. And I knew I had a car, and I didn't know where it was. And it was about 6:30 in the morning, and I saw some young men. The surf was up, and some young men were coming down to go surfing. And that's the part of my story where the demoralization comes in. I had to ask these young men where I was, and could they direct me to the street? I found my car, and I stopped at a payphone on the way home, and called my kids. Now, at this time, I had a daughter who was almost 17 years old. I said, I had car trouble. Yeah, And I said, y'all go on to school, and I will be there when you come home. And they left, and I hit the nearest liquor store. You see? Bought a 6-pack of cold cans and waited until I knew they were gone. and then I went home. At 7:30 in the morning on April 2nd, I had my last beer. Through a series of events that happened, one was being in the kitchen of my home by myself and saying out loud, "If you're really real, God, I can't do this anymore." Because for 5 years prior to that, I had stood at my kitchen sink every morning with the bottle, with tears running down my face, not wanting to drink, but not being able not to. And wanting, of course, to always wanted to be a lady, always wanted to be one of those. And I would have little episodes like, I'd go in the shower and throw up and push it down the hole with my toe so that nobody could hear me, you see. Spent some time sleeping on the bathroom floor because the coldness made it feel better. Going to bed and keeping one foot on the floor so the room didn't spin so badly. Yeah, I'm in the right place here. I'm not telling you yes. I ended up in a hospital in Fountain Valley, California. I'd called my doctor, and he told me that it would probably be best if I took a cab to his office. He didn't think I ought to be driving. And so you don't want to tell me not to do that. So I did drive to his office, which, and I was promptly admitted into the hospital there. And I was there 3 days. I don't remember much about that. And what I would like to share about that is this. I wanted absolutely no visitors, none. My husband was out of town. He traveled a lot. And he was in San Francisco. And a couple of days later, my doctor came in and said to me, "Oh, I see you had a visitor." And I said, "No, nobody's been here." And he said, "Well, I'm looking right at your chart. You said no visitors, but you allowed this person to come in." And I said, "Who was it?" I don't know. I don't have a clue. He said, "Well, there was a gentleman here from Alcoholics Anonymous." And to this day, I do not remember that man coming to that room. I don't know what he said. I would not know him if I bumped into him on the street. You see? And according to the chart, he came at 10:30 at night. And when I spoke where I got sober, I would always say, if that man is in this room, I wanted to thank him. And so what I would like to say now is, I don't know if this tape's going to get around the corner, but if there's any chance he ever would hear it, I wanted to thank him for that. You see? There was a little nurse there who every time I kind of came around would pat my hand and she'd rub my face with this damp cloth and she'd say, "It's going to be all right, honey. It's going to be all right." And she's the one that laid the phone number by the phone and said, "If you think maybe you want to call these people." See, and I find this all afterwards because I don't remember all of this much. And I was, like I say, I was in there for 3 days. My husband didn't fly home because the doctor said there was probably nothing he could do anyway, and my husband said, "That's fine with me." He'd reached the end. The only thing that was making him stay around was his concern about what would happen to the children if he left. Now, I said I had 3 kids. Well, we had 2 more, so that's 5. And I am not stupid, okay? I knew that he was upset. And so my doctor said, "I'm going to have somebody else come in and talk with you." And I knew the minute he said that, it was going to be a shrink. because I had talked to so many of them. And sure enough, he came in, and it was quite late in the evening, and he chatted with me, and he said to me, "Gloria, you have very grave emotional problems." He said, "But your biggest problem is you're an alcoholic." And he paused for a minute, and he says, "And I don't treat alcoholics." I thought, oh, okay. But, so here's the mind. I said, "Can you stay here for 7 minutes?" And he said, "Well," I said, "we just live at the bottom of the hill, and I want my husband to hear this." And they called him, and my husband came up there, and he told him that. And so now you see, I'm a very sick person. And yes, by all means, I'll go to treatment. You see. Because what the doctor said was, "I don't treat alcoholics, but I know somebody who can help you." I finished the 3 days at the hospital, and my husband said, do you want to go to treatment? And of course, yes, I want to go to treatment, because he was being very kind. And he'd been to a couple of Al-Anon meetings. And back then, Pete probably would have told me to take a cab or a bus or, get there the best way I could. But deep down in his heart, he still loved me, you see. And he took me to this rehabilitation center. That was it was a pilot program. It was one of the very first non-aversion programs. And I don't know if I'd have lived through an aversion. They give you all this stuff. They give you this pill. And they give you this mirror. And then they give you the most favorite booze you like. And you drink this stuff, that pill closes something up, and you just throw up like crazy, And you do that a lot for a few days, I guess. I had a few friends that did that, and they didn't stay sober. Some of them do, I guess. I'm talking from my own experience, and I would like to say now that anything and everything I say is my own opinion. It's my own experience, not opinion. I'm sorry. And I don't speak for Alcoholics Anonymous because we have no authorities here. Isn't that good? So this is where I went. And at that time, it was a 3-week program. And I was there 3 weeks before I knew what I was there for. So they approached me and thought it would be wise if I stayed another 3. And because I didn't want to go home, I said that would probably be a good idea. Well, I'm here to tell you I made 5 pairs of moccasins. Yeah. I made 2 mosaic ashtrays. I did 3 decoupage. And I tried to weave a basket, but I couldn't. So I remember sitting in a we were supposed to go to these meetings, AA meetings, and they would take us. And I never made one of those meetings. I did not want to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't know why I didn't want to go. I guess because fear of the unknown, maybe. So there was a counselor there who gave me a telephone number and said, I want you to contact this woman. She's in Alcoholics Anonymous before you go home. And every time I'd see this counselor in the hall, I'd dodge her, One day she caught me going by and she said, "Have you gotten a hold of June yet?" I said, "I keep trying." I said, "But her number's always busy." Just step into my office. So I did, and she dialed the phone. And, "Oh, I have somebody here who'd like to talk to you." I talked to this lady for a minute, and she said, "When you get home, the first thing I'd like you to do is hug your kids kiss your husband and call me. I went home, and that's exactly what I did. You see? This lady and 4 others, which are lovingly called the posse, scooped me up. They didn't call and say, would you like to go to a meeting this evening? They said, we'll be there at 7:30. And I'm not going to disappoint them. All right. So that's how I got started in Alcoholics Anonymous. And where I got sober, on the front of these podiums, there's this big sign that says, we care. And for a while, I always had it said, Mr. Carr. And I couldn't figure out who that was. So when I finally, it's in that writing, that olden writing. And when I finally figured out, it said, we care. And I got a phone call every single day for 30 days from one of these women. And I thought, my God, they're nosy. And at the end of 30 days, they quit calling every day. And I thought, they don't care. Well, I heard in the first few meetings that the first meeting I ever went to was somewhere up the coast. I couldn't tell you where. I don't remember. But it was with these ladies, and it was the first meeting. We walked in, and it was huge. It was a speaker meeting, and it was big. And they asked for newcomers. Well, I didn't know what a newcomer was. And when they asked for newcomers and I wasn't moving, the lady next to me gave me this shot in the ribs with her elbow. She said, stand up. And I stood up, and then they go there and they have you start at the beginning and go around and introduce yourself by your first name only. And it got to be my turn, and I choked. When I had to say the word alcoholic, it was like I couldn't do that, you see. And somehow it came out. And that's all I remember about that meeting. I remember everything that was said. I don't know who was there. I don't even know who the speaker was, but there was a lot of folks there. And so I asked one of these ladies, June, if she would be my sponsor. And well, you've all asked people to be your sponsor. You know what it's like. The sweat runs down your boobs, and you shake a lot. And it's just not comfortable. So I didn't ask her in person. I called her. You see. And she said to me, Gloria, she said, I really don't think I would have the time it would take to be your sponsor. And I took that as immediate rejection, But what I would have to say is that when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I was not wrapped real tight, you see. And so she said, but I do know someone that you might want to ask. And when she told me who it was, which was one of the posse, I thought, yes, that's the one. She was real soft-spoken, real easygoing, She had the nicest smile. And I thought, she's perfect. Well, I'm here to tell you that BG, being soft-spoken and very gentle and quiet, has a way about her. And it was never you have to. It was always kind of like she put it in a way that I wanted to. Does that make sense? And I'll say this with love, Laura. I've been heard, I've been called the sponsor from hell. Yeah. And I've been also told that it's been said with love. And that's kind of what my sponsor was like, And I'm going to throw this in because it bothers me. I've heard terminology going around Alcoholics Anonymous called Nazi sponsors. And I think that's real sad. That's not my own thing. Because I am just old enough to remember what that was like. And I would never want to be called that. So I just, sometimes I have these little things. So now I have a sponsor. And I have 5 kids, 2 of which are teenagers. And they don't even know which way is up at that, at that age. And I have a husband, and I have a dog. I have a house. I have 2 cars, and I don't want any of it. You see? I don't want any of it. Because I know if I don't have all that, it would be easier for me to stay sober. See? And for some reason, I was going to give Alcoholics Anonymous 9 months. And I don't know why I picked that number other than I had a lot of 9 monthses. And whatever was supposed to happen was supposed to happen in 9 months. And I went to a lot of meetings. I was told to go to a speaker meeting, a big book study, 12-step study. I was sentenced to a woman's meeting, and I could go to a mixed meeting. So that's 5. Okay. Well, the first year I was sober, I went to no less than 2 to 3 meetings a day because I couldn't stand to be in my own house, and I especially couldn't stand to be around those children. And I went to evening meetings because I didn't really care to be around my husband. You see? Now, John was introduced to Al-Anon. And what I would like to say about that is, I thank God for Al-Anon today. Because I really don't think, had it not been for Al-Anon, we'd still be married. Because at a year sober, I was sitting across the room from that gentleman. He was reading the newspaper, and I thought, if you weren't going to Al-Anon, I couldn't be married to you right now. Our marriage was not instantly happy. I was not one of those people who came to Alcoholics Anonymous and everything got better. It changed. The first year I was sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, I wanted to drink every single day. Desperately. I would get in my car and I would drive down to my sponsor's house. I wouldn't call first. I'd just go, And she'd let me, and I would sit in her den on the floor and cry. And she'd be fixing supper or whatever, and every once in a while she'd walk by and look in the door and she'd say, "It's okay, honey, it's going to be okay." And then her husband would come home from work and he'd walk and he'd say, "Was Gloria here?" And he'd sit down and watch the news and he'd say, "It'll be okay, Gloria." And I look back on those things and I think, I didn't know what willing to go to any length meant, but I think I was going to any length, My sponsor is a book person. I'm a book person because I'm a firm believer that the steps are what's going to keep you sober. Okay? I think meetings are very good. I think they are very good. But for me, that's the social part of Alcoholics Anonymous. I hear good things in meetings. Alcoholics Anonymous have taught me how to be a lady, you see. But it's the steps, and God as I understand them, that keep me sober a day at a time, as long as I stay willing. My sponsor was also very active in service, and so consequently so was I. And I think service is important, and I'm not going to talk about service. I'm not going to give you a pitch on service. There's a lot of people here tonight who have been of service. You know, and this thing has just gone off so well, you know. It seems like when I start to talk, I have so much I would like to say. I received my first, the 9 months. That's what it was. Up to that point, it was every day and every night I had to go to a meeting. And at around 9 months sober, I found myself getting ready to go out the front door saying, I'm going to meeting. Not I have to. This women's meeting that I went to was at that time a question and answer meeting. They had 2 people on the panel, and they would pass this basket around. You could write questions and put them in there. So I went to this meeting for the longest time, and I would hear this reference to this little red book when they would, ask for an answer. Well, I read in this little red book. And so I didn't know what that was, so I printed on this piece of paper, and I put my question in the basket because I knew they'd read my writing, and I didn't want them to know who I was. Yeah. And the question was, what's the title of the little red book? And I see that was over here tonight, or when I came in Thursday or Friday, and it reminded me of that. I continue to go to a lot of meetings. Well, at least I think it's a lot. I don't go to any less than 3, and more sometimes. We got into the steps because my sponsor says, you were in treatment long enough. You're dried out, so your head's clear enough to get started. I don't understand waiting 6 months or 9 months or however long. So we started on the steps, and I had no problem with the first step. I'd been told since I was 12 years old there was something wrong with me, admitting that I was powerless over alcohol, and I didn't have a problem with that one when it was explained to me what that meant, and my example of standing at the sink, not wanting to drink but having to, and having to do it. To me, that was a powerlessness. Being restored to sanity, I believe that's happened in my life because it tells me in the big book somewhere around step 10 that having been restored to sanity, I have days that my mind's very busy on it, but I'm not insane today. I have been restored to sanity. I did the 3rd step prayer. We do step 3. And I want you to know that there was nobody at my house. Everybody's gone. John was out of town again. And I went in my bedroom and locked the door and got down on my knees, and I did the 3rd step prayer. And nothing seemed to be happening. And so I told that to my sponsor, and she said, well, when did you do it? And I told her, and she said, well, who'd you do it with? I said, nobody. She said, you better go back and read the step again. Read the book again, not the step, the book. And so I gave her a call and said, would ask her if she'd do the 3rd step with me because it says we do it with another person, you see. And we did, and changes started to take place in my life. I started to kind of like my husband, And then did that prayer, and then she says, now you get on with your inventory immediately, because that's what the book says to do. I did my inventory. I was just a few months sober, and I hid it because I didn't want anybody to find it. And so I put it on my side of the bed between the mattresses. And I slept on that sucker for nights, And I was not very good. I was not doing very well. So it was Halloween. And there was a big party at the club. And my husband wanted to go, and I didn't want to go. I didn't know how to do it yet. I didn't know how to do it yet. So I called my sponsor again, and I said, I have this step I want to do, and can you do that? And she said yes, and I went down there. And we did that, and before we did that, we did a prayer. And when I got all done, all the things that I thought were so horrendous and so awful, you see, she looked at me and she said, Gloria, she said, that wouldn't even make a good soap opera, And we went into her kitchen and got a match, and I burned it in her sink. And that's when a lot of things started to change in my life and in my sobriety. I worked the rest of the steps, one right after the other. I didn't get any breaks. I don't know about anybody else. And at 5 years sober, I was sitting in a meeting, and it was a Friday night meeting. My husband was with me, and it was podium participation. And I looked over at him, and I realized that I loved him at 5 years sober. Because my sponsor would say to me, Gloria, you don't have to do anything today. Just today, you don't have to do anything. And so I didn't do anything for 5 years, and I fell in love with this man I was married to. And we've continued on. And it's been a lot of work. It's been a lot of work. I received my first birthday cake in Alcoholics Anonymous from an Al-Anon. And it was at an Al-Anon convention. And so I've been involved with both programs. Those children I told you about, out of the 5, I have one who's addict alcoholic. I would like to see some of the rest of them go to Al-Anon. I did take them to Alateen, and for whatever reason, all they heard was abuse and those sorts of things, and I never physically abused my children. That's, I just didn't. I loved them very much. I didn't like them a lot of the time, but I did love them, you see. So there came a time when I found myself running to Al-Anon. And what I found with Al-Anon is that it enhanced what I found in Alcoholics Anonymous, and that they meshed beautifully. I got up to a point where I could go to bed at night and go to sleep, not knowing if he was alive or dead. You see? I would get phone calls anonymously telling me that they had seen my son. So I knew he was alive. I didn't see or hear from him for over 1.5 years at one time. And he turned up, you see. My children are all basically pretty okay for the most part. And this young man that I was telling you about has been clean and sober in Alcoholics Anonymous for 6 years. Yeah. My sister has been sober in Alcoholics Anonymous for 14 years. She just had a birthday. I have 2 nephews in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I think that the traditions are very important, because the way this stuff runs in my family, I want Alcoholics Anonymous to be here when my grandkids grow up. You see? And they all know that their Nana's an alcoholic, and none of them have ever seen her drunk. Has he? My husband came to Alcoholics Anonymous. I guess I shouldn't do this. This is anonymity. But anyway, he breaks it. He came in 10 years ago, 11 years ago now. And what, where else could I go to have things like this happen? I don't know. I know our literature says that AA is not the only way, but it's been the only way for me, you see. I'm one of those people in Alcoholics Anonymous who took literally what the book says about being quick to see where religious people can be right, And I had an experience with that and my children, and I went to investigate, and I ended up staying. The book says that, about King Alcohol, and I served King Alcohol with everything I had inside of me, you see. And Alcoholics Anonymous has made it possible for me today to serve a different king, that's all. And I know from my own personal experience that if you ever saw Gloria drunk, it's simply because she'd rather be drunk than sober. You see? I have had experiences in my sobriety, and really there's only one or two people in this room that know me, but I've come to a place where I've lost the fear of financial, insecurity? Economic insecurity, there's a difference there, right? Well, mine's financial. Because I lost everything in sobriety. I came out of it with a car and a husband and the kids. No dogs, no house. And I've had 2 children attempt suicide within a week of each other. Serious attempts. I've had births of grandchildren. I've had 2 children with cancer. My oldest boy, the one I was telling you about, was not expected to see his 29th birthday. And he'll be 36 this July. Yeah. And you want to talk about learning to live a day at a time and appreciating what's there. And a year after he got done with his chemotherapy treatments, my daughter called me on the phone and said, "Mom, I have cancer." And I was devastated. I can't think of another word. And I thought, God, didn't I learn the lesson the first time? And she's had surgery, and she just had her last scan, and she's clean still. So we pretty much live our lives in my family a day at a time. And we enjoy doing that. And all the hurts and the animosities and the things that go along with the disease of alcohol and alcoholism that touch not only us but everybody that in our lives, For me, those things have all been healed pretty much. And I know that doesn't happen for everybody, and I think that's why that says in the big book that we can stay sober with or without. It says with or without a job, with or without whatever. And I believe that to mean with or without anything, that we can do that. And I think we can do that because we all have each other, you see. And we have a power greater than ourselves. And it's warm in here. And I was really surprised at the number of ladies that stayed. I don't know about you guys, but I thought you'd probably all go to bed. Because it is warm, and we've had a very nice time, and we played late. And so what I would like to do is I'd just like to thank you all very much for having me. And I would love to talk to any of you that would like to talk with me afterwards. And just thanks for letting me be a part of all of this.